Welcome to my presentation. In this presentation, let us see how to find the angle between two vectors. In here, if we have two vectors, vector u and vector v, and if we want to find the angle between these two vectors, we can find them as follows. Okay, so 1. If we have from the starting point, if we represent this as vector u and on this side as vector v, then if this is the measure we are looking at, if this is the measure theta, these two vectors are facing opposite directions. These two are facing opposite directions, so therefore theta in here is going to be equal to pi, and then therefore cosine theta is going to be equal to -1. Okay, that is one. Then the second one is, let us say we have two vectors. One vector from the starting point, one vector is going up like that. We'll call that as vector u. The second vector is going in this direction, and if we represent that as vector v, the measure between these two vectors, if we call that as theta, vector u dot vector v is less than 0, then theta is going to be greater than pi over 2 and less than pi. Therefore cosine theta in this case is going to be less than 0. Okay, so that is the condition. Then the third condition is, if we have two vectors, let us say this is the starting point and we have a vector u like that and vector v in that direction. This is vector v, so this is vector v in that direction, and let us say the angle between these two vectors is theta, and if that is equal to 90 degrees, then vector u dot vector v is going to be equal to 0. So theta therefore will be equal to pi over 2, and also cosine theta is going to be equal to 0. So cosine pi over 2 or cosine 90 degrees is going to be equal to 0 in that way. Let us look at a few more of these measures. If we have a measure like this, if we have a vector u in this direction, and then if we have another vector v in this direction, the measure between these two vectors is, if we represent that as theta, then vector u dot vector v, the dot product is going to be greater than 0. Theta is going to be greater than 0 and less than pi over 2, and therefore cosine theta in this case is going to be a value greater than 0. Okay, then another condition is, if we have a vector u and if we have another vector overlying on that, I'm going to represent that in red, and if we call that as vector v, then these two vectors are in the same direction. They are in the same direction. They are in the same direction. Therefore theta is equal to 0, because one vector is lying on top of the other. There is no angle between those two vectors, so theta is going to be equal to 0. Therefore cosine theta therefore is going to be equal to 1, isn't it? Cosine theta is going to be equal to 1. Cosine 0 is going to be equal to 1. So these are some of the things which we want to know. If u and v are vectors, then the angle between the two vectors can be represented in any of these five different ways which we have demonstrated in here. In my next presentation, we shall look at some more examples to see how to find the measure of an angle between two vectors.